Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis News from August 15th to the 21st. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. And there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you feel ready if you wish to do so. We're going to start with this news from TucsonSentinel.com as Arizona medical cannabis sales crater while recreational cannabis sales stay sky high. So happy to hear that out of Arizona. Just to highlight, sales of medical cannabis dipped to slightly less than 45 million in May, which we do see when a state launches adult use programs, because when they know what kind of cannabis they need, they don't need to go see their doctor every time. They can just go straight to the recreational shop. So this is a trend that we do see in states that reform their laws. Their lowest total since January 2021, when adults were first allowed to purchase cannabis for rec use. Meanwhile, initial estimates from tax collectors peg rec sales at 76.5 million, the fifth time adult use sales surpassed the 70 million mark, and ADOR revised April's sales upwards to 81.2 million, up from the initial estimate of 75.5 million, making it the best sales month yet for recreational cannabis, while the previous record was 80.4 million in March. So while we did see a bit of a slump in May sales after the strongest March and April ever, especially with 420, that is to be expected, it seems preliminary numbers for June indicate 33.7 million in med sales, with rec sales already on pace to hit another record with 66.4 million reported so far. And so it seems like that's a lot less than previous months, but if they think they're already on pace to hit another record, we don't know when this was reported. And so ADR has not released fiscal numbers beyond the preliminary June totals, so we don't know what June's looking like so far, but good to see that they're expecting to see another record hit. As we move into July, where we're seeing, like in Illinois with Lollapalooza, and we're seeing peak spending in the summer, we anticipate another bit of a jump up in sales from June to July as well. So we'll keep our eyes peeled. Good job, Arizona, but there's more info down here if you wanted to pause to read. And then on to Florida, so Office of Medical Cannabis. You can scroll down to see new dispensary approvals for this past week of the 15th to the 19th of August. We can see Move, backed by Verano, opened a new dispensary in Hollywood, and then Trulieve opened yet another location in Auburndale. And so with that, Florida increased their qualified patient count to 743,467, which represents an increase of 2,013 patients week over week. So we do love to see that back over the 2,000 mark as more patients in Florida are turning to a safer, non-addictive alternative as summer is coming to an end. And with that, we can see all of the dispensations for all the MSOs from August 12th to the 18th. So we got all the MSOs listed here, the number of dispensary locations they have active and operational in Florida, and then we can see week over week the number of milligrams of THC sold, milligrams of CBD sold, and ounces of smokable flower. So you can check week over week to see whether an MSO that you're invested in Florida is either increasing or decreasing their market share week over week. And so with that, some big news. I don't necessarily know what it means, but I just want to share it with you as of right now. So Sam Reisman, thank you for sharing this, as he is a senior cannabis reporter for Law 360 covering policy. Justin, the First Circuit affirms that the Dormant Commerce Clause in the U.S. Constitution applies to the federal illegal cannabis industry. And so, from my understanding, the First Circuit does not mean as much as, say, the Fifth Circuit. And so, while this is good, I don't necessarily know what it means yet. So I just invite you, if you happen to know what this means, let me know in the comments. I've been trying to decipher through it, but I've just had a busy week with plans for a friend's birthday and work as well. And so I will put the opinion down in the description if you wanted to read through it. But just posting this here, and then I'll just pop this open so you can pause to read if you'd like, but a little more on this just to give you some context. So Marijuana Moment reports that federal court's cannabis ruling on Maine's licensing rules could open door to interstate commerce, experts say. And so it's still early, but I'll just run you through this. As a federal appellate court ruled on Wednesday that Maine's law prohibiting non-residents from owning medical cannabis businesses in the state violates the U.S. Constitution. But legal experts say that the decision could have far more reaching implications for interstate cannabis commerce and could create possible complications for social equity programs. As industry stakeholders have been closely monitoring the case, as many have argued that the Constitution's Dormant Commerce Clause at the center of the ruling does in fact apply to the cannabis industry regardless of ongoing federal cannabis prohibition. In a 2-1 decision, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the First Circuit affirmed that interpretation, which is broadly meant to prevent states from enforcing laws that unduly restrict interstate commerce unless given specific instruction from Congress. Maine's residency requirement for medical cannabis licensing is an example of an excessive regulation to that end, the panel's majority found. And so while cannabis might be federally illegal, the court said that Congress has acknowledged that the existence of a market in medical cannabis through a spending bill rider known as the Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment, which bars the Justice Department from using its funds to interfere in state legal medical cannabis markets, which is at least good enough to protect the industry so far. In passing that measure, especially from the predatory, federal regulations that we've seen in the past, but in passing that measure and annually renewing it each year since 2014, Congress also acknowledged that this market may continue to exist in some circumstances free from federal criminal enforcement, the ruling says. And thus, whatever these circumstances may be with respect to other goods that Congress has deemed contraband, this is not the case in which Congress may be understood to have criminalized a national market, with no expectation that an interstate market would continue to operate. Quite the opposite. Now, again, I don't think this necessarily means we're getting interstate commerce anytime soon as well, so we just want to deliver that. Doesn't mean we're going to see some sort of reform action anytime soon, but just sharing the story so far. And so if you do know more about what this could mean, please let me know in the comments, but just wanted to relay the message thus far. And we also got another big sort of unexpected news, but we'll take it, as Betting Bruiser has shared this breaking news, which came out August 17th. IIROC Canada bans naked short selling effective immediately, which we love to see, especially since while we've been waiting for the CSC to create that new alternative, more liquid market that gives institutional investors easier access to MSOs, we haven't gotten that, so we'll take this in the interim. But again, I just want to add that I don't necessarily know how quickly this can be implemented or whether this means that anyone actively naked shorting right now has to close out their position right away. And so with that, I'm going to include this article. You can grab it in the description below if you wanted to read through it deeper. Guidance on participant obligations to have reasonable expectation to settle any trade resulting from the entry of a short sale order. And so with that though, just a bit more of what Betting Bruiser added for context. No shorting a locked up position. Finally, regulators are listening. And so he adds a bit of context down here. Only a handful of brokerages like PI Financial and Mackie allowed naked short selling. This decreases the ability of short sellers to wash shares and use algorithms. And no shorting a locked up position apparently creates an equal playing field for those without a prime brokerage retail. And so again, just take what Betting Bruiser says with a grain of salt. He's someone delivering this information, so we obviously want to anticipate that it might be true and that he is telling us what is going to be happening. But on top of that, it seems like while this is promising, there seems like there could be a lot more steps that IIROC could take. But additional steps he'd like to see put into place: uptick rule, regulators given the resources to enforce these rules. That's what we would obviously want to see as well. So if anyone, obviously just doesn't listen to this new guidance, meaningful penalties for brokers who facilitated clients whom broke the rules, and more up-to-date disclosure on short seller interest on given stocks. And so again, I'm asking, does this mean anything in the coming time? Well, possibly good news, and again, just take it from Betting Bruiser for now with a grain of salt. In the next 3 to 5 days, one can expect to see some substantial buying. Brokerages will adjust to find borrow for its most highest paying clients, but there will be overall less downward pressure on the names going forward. And so we can probably anticipate less end of day dumps and more sort of just end of day staying where they're at, which we would love to see because it just requires less climbing back up the next day when we open up. And so lastly with that, just to share some good news, as states are cracking down, much like some regulators might be, police in New York City seized trucks being used to sell cannabis. And so this does sound promising. Let's also check out how much of a circus New York now seems to be, as officials on Tuesday said 20 trucks had been seized, but on Wednesday said the number was 19. Okay, which one is it? The trucks did not have licenses from the Department of Health, obviously because they're operating illegally, according to Madre. Police officials said the seizures were part of efforts to address quality of life issues in New York City after complaints, not to enforce the laws against illicit traffickers or suppliers of illegal cannabis. No, I mean, the police should still be able to enforce those laws. There's no reason against it, but because of quality of life issues after complaints. Like, why wouldn't the police just want to do their job and get these illegal suppliers off the street? The seizures were made by the community response team and the Manhattan Business Improvement District team, not even the police. Did the police do anything in New York? In June, New York City Sheriff Office deputies seized a dozen Weed World vehicles. Those were seized because of parking debt, not because they are supplying illegal cannabis illegally to those of New York. It makes no sense. And so obviously, the sooner New York would get their head out of their asses and launch their adult use program, the more they would benefit the citizens of New York. They would supply with legal, safe products, and they would provide jobs, tax revenue, all that. So while this is nonsensical, at least they've seized some trucks, and they're hopefully moving in the right direction. So with that, wanted to share this clip from Squawk Box CNBC. Our pot stocks a safe bet with the Safe Banking Act gaining momentum. And so it is just nice to see some mainstream media outlet talking about the Safe Banking Act. So we'll have to see what their frame and how they're approaching it in this video. So
pot stocks, are they a safe bet with the Safe Banking Act gaining momentum? CNBC's Frank Holland joins us with a look at the sector. Frank.
Hey, good morning, Melissa. Well, cannabis stocks are doubling the S&P this month, rallying on high hopes for reform happening sometime this year. And we are seeing the most meaningful push for cannabis reform at the federal level ever. It's true. First Senate hearing just last month, and now this month. Canopy, more than 40% higher. Sundial, nearly 30%. Aurora, more than 15%. Canadian names seeing the biggest boost because they list on the major exchanges. But US MSO, Green Thumb, also up nearly 20%. But reform doesn't necessarily mean legalization. Cowen says there's a 60% chance that the Safe Banking Act will pass this year. The bill effectively provides a pathway for banks to do business with cannabis companies legally. Right now, most are limited or they just choose not to because cannabis is federally illegal. SAFE would also reduce the cost of capital for cannabis companies, which was an estimated 10 to 15% in 2021. The biggest hurdle right now, so-called social justice provisions that Senator Cory Booker is becoming increasingly vocal
Idiocracy.
about. They generally include some criminal justice measures and economic incentives for people impacted by the war on drugs, and that generally means people of color. Cowen says this about the Safe Banking Act: it must include enough social justice provisions to satisfy Democrats without turning away GOP support. If Booker gets more aggressive in pushing for social justice measures, then we don't see how a SAFE Act package could get through the Senate.
Leave it to
So
Booker
a lot to
win
think
it,
about when
right?
it comes to the politics of this. Cannabis ETFs mixed in the last week, but all have seen a big spike in trading volume. Back over to you.
And obviously that volume indicator is nice to see, but can we trust the Dems? Obviously, I'm not holding my breath. I'm not expecting them to do anything promising for us, but it would be great if we are pleasantly surprised. And so with that, on to some MSO news as Cresco Labs announces second quarter 2022 results. And so company happy to report 4% year-over-year revenue growth and 11% year-over-year adjusted EBITDA growth, continues industry leadership with branded product performance and retail productivity, while the company provides positive update on Columbia Care divestiture process, which is what we really want to hear, while regulatory approvals and closing timeline does seem to be heading to the fact that they will close the merger and this will become a new entity. And so with that, just happy to share that Columbia Care, while they focus on wholesale, I am happy just to see that they did not lose sales sequentially quarter over quarter, despite the fact that they don't have any position or footprint in New Jersey yet. And so with that, just going to go through the second quarter financial highlights as well. I'll leave the link below if you wanted to go through it and provide a deeper dive, but I do have some other resources that do, in fact, provide the deeper dive into Cresco for us. So second quarter 2022 financial highlights, just to go through them. Second quarter rev of $218 million, up 4% year over year, and I think up 1% sequentially. And so again, despite no new markets coming online, the fact that they kept steady sales quarter over quarter and managed to increase their profit, I'd say that's a step in the right direction, especially as they're just optimizing and cutting costs. Adjusted gross profit of $116 million or 53% of revenue, an increase of 8% year over year, excluding fair value markup for acquired inventory and cost of goods sold adjustments for acquisitions and other non-core costs. While second quarter adjusted EBITDA of $51 million or 23% of revenue, an increase of 11% year over year. And some other things that just, again, setting Cresco apart, I think in the future, once they do merge with Columbia Care, and they get that extra, number of dispensaries on the ground with them. But on top of that, having that wholesale revenue of 95, which maintained the company's position as number one U.S. seller of branded cannabis products with leading share positions in the flower, concentrates, and vape categories. And while wholesale might not be the best approach right now because of the price compression, I do still think it's a good thing to be the leader in the long run, while achieving the leading branded share position in Massachusetts and maintain number one share position in both Illinois and Pennsylvania. Retail revenue increased 22% year over year. And so this is one thing that I wanted to highlight, that at least as a Cresco shareholder, and I should say that, so this is not advice, this is just my opinion and why I'm not too concerned about the lack of growth in this recent press release or this recent earnings, to $123 million or $2.5 million per average store open in the quarter. And apparently those same store sales increased 6% year over year. And so whatever they're doing in their stores, it seems to be working. So I wanted to highlight that, while ending the quarter with $90 million of cash on hand. And then on July 8th, the Columbia Care shareholders approved the previously announced all-stock acquisition by Cresco Labs, and the company continues to work towards closing the transaction around year-end. And so you can pause to read for more management commentary here, and balance sheet, liquidity, and other financial information. And then as well, just going to scroll down, you can pause to read social equity and their education development program, as well as capital markets and M&A activity. And so there's more, obviously, if you want to scroll down and look at the technical numbers. But I'm going to allow some other more advanced in finance people to do that. So Sayshu Metatrella, thank you for providing your Q2 2022 earnings and your takeaways on Cresco's recent earnings. And so we've got from 1 down to exposed. You can pause to read for more detail on his breakdown and his deeper dive. And then scrolling down from versus others down to 7 on the bright side. Company maintained its number one branded share in Illinois, PA, and became number one in Massachusetts this quarter as well. So you can pause to read from there. And then from as well, 8 down to overall a decent quarter, all things considered, with management clearly focused on, I imagine, the merger with Columbia Care and Cresco. That's probably what he's saying down there. So you can pause to read. And as well, basically focusing on that new entity, and once they merge, hopefully before the end of this year. And so with that, we've also got one from Cannavestments, largely in line, Q2 from Cresco Labs with results right at consensus. Stable margins in a tough wholesale environment, reflective of good operational expertise, but also continued cash burn as taxes were due. Flat growth likely in half of 2022 in advance of transformational Columbia Care acquisition. So more information on this, of course, if you wanted to pause to read. This one from Cannavestments. So thank you, Nick, for making these available. While we've got Air Wellness's second quarter 2022 results. And so I'm just going to share this as well because I bought shares of Air Wellness a few weeks back. And I was obviously very happy to get them under a market cap of 500 mil. At that point, I thought they were a steal, and I bought shares, I think, at $6.75 Canadian. Obviously, I could have waited because what I forgot, and just the classic mistake, but I've obviously caught the lesson. Now I'm trying to learn from it. Is that I knew that Air did not get approval at the same time as the other MSOs like Verano, like Curaleaf, and like Green Thumb did in New Jersey. Remember, Air was approved a month later. And so for that reason, I'm realizing in hindsight, I should have just waited until they reported these second quarter earnings without the New Jersey growth. Then it would have been smarter for me to buy in now. Now, obviously, again, I try not to get too nitpicky and just I'm happy to buy at a price that I'm happy to buy it. But that's one thing in hindsight that I'm like, okay, knowing that Air did not have New Jersey online, that would have been smart for me to wait just because I would have been able to get in at like $5.40 or $5.50 Canadian right now. Again, in hindsight, obviously it's a clearer picture, but just one thing that, again, try to anticipate or just try to remember all the details of a company before you're buying in. So with that, though, Air Wellness reports their second quarter. We can see second quarter financial highlights. And so, again, without that New Jersey growth online that they did get, following whatever months that these figures are accounting for. Regardless, Q2 2022, it seems like they were just a little bit flat from last quarter, 110.1 million. So year over year, still 20.6% change, which is optimistic, especially in this new fast-growing industry. But of course, quarter one to Q2 change of -1 was not ideal to see. Their gross profit fell from 45.5 million in Q1 to 40.3 million in Q2, and so still a significant year-over-year change of 80.6% in growth for that gross profit. But of course, quarter-over-quarter decline of 11.5%. But again, this is without New Jersey coming online, and so while they were late to be approved, it didn't mean they were never getting approved. Plus, Air did recently just open a few new stores in Massachusetts as well. So I do anticipate that in Q3 and Q4, Air Wellness will see significant growth, and so I'm still happy to be invested at the price I'm at because I do expect to get a nice return on investment, especially if we end up running into the election and into the new year like we typically do see in election seasons. Again, can't call that yet, but we're gonna have to be paying attention for that. So just wanted to highlight why I don't think these are as bad as they do appear on the surface. But of course, second quarter and recent highlights and the Northeast market and Southwest markets, you can pause to read if you're interested to see what Air Wellness is doing in those markets. We can scroll down to Florida, M&A highlights, and financing capital structure as well. You can pause to read. But the main thing I will look into, or at least read through, is their outlook going forward, as they are anticipating a bit more growth coming thanks to New Jersey. It's based on the results to date, coupled with our uncertain macroeconomic backdrop. Air is updating its previously issued guidance regarding 2022 financial results. The company expects revenue, adjusted EBITDA, and operating income to grow approximately 10% sequentially from Q2 to Q3, as the New Jersey growth will offset the current price compression that all the MSOs are dealing with right now, and an acceleration in the pace of sequential growth into Q4. So they are anticipating strong growth from New Jersey going forward. The company's expectations for future results are based on the assumptions and risks detailed in its MD&A for the period ended June 30th, 2022 as filed on CEDAR. And so more information on that can be found on CEDAR, of course, but I do think they're mostly referring to just coming online in New York and the other stores that they've recently opened. That will offset the price compression that unfortunately did not make these results too favorable. And so with that, thank you Cannavestments for sharing another one. We've got poor Q2 showing from Air Wellness, again lowering guidance with growth levers not materializing as expected. Elevated operational expenses and declining margins have kept cash flow negative, with debt now quite high at 455 million. But Q3 and Q4 will show improvements with new assets online, just less than expected unfortunately, as their previous run rate guidance, had all things gone according to plan and New Jersey come online on time, would have been 800 million, and so they'll definitely be short of that number. But I still feel good getting in at a market cap of less than 500 million for this company, especially the growth prospects that they have in the coming years, and for the chance for them to be bought out by another company that wants that footprint in New Jersey, that good footprint that they're establishing, as well as in Florida, as they've opened many stores in there as well. So you can pause to read what Cannavestments has to say. But on to some other MSO news, as Verano announces the opening of Zenleaf Clarksburg, the company's 4th West Virginia dispensary and 111th location nationwide. So we're going to see Verano continuing to expand, as Zenleaf Clarksburg is located at this address, a busy thoroughfare with an average daily traffic count of 17,500. 20 total vehicles. And the dispensary is based in Harrison County, which has a population of over 65,000, so hopefully that will fuel some growth. And Verano's active operations span 13 states, comprised of 111 dispensaries as of now, and 13 cultivation and processing facilities with more than 1 million square feet of cultivation capacity. So more information down here, probably about the Virginia market as well. West Virginia market, sorry. If you're interested, you can pause to read. While Feel the Burn, Cookies co-founder and CEO Berner touches down in the Garden State to host Cookies Corner grand opening at the Apothecarium Lothian. So this is the one that they're talking about with the drive-through as well. So good to see, obviously, TerraSend expanding in New Jersey and seeing this state finally reaping all the benefits of ending cannabis prohibition and launching their adult use program that they could have gotten a long time ago. But just as good to see New Jersey set to get its first taste of exclusive Cookies vape cartridges and pre-rolls in celebration of opening day. And so Cookies, a globally recognized cannabis brand, along with TerraSend, announced that the Apothecarium Lodi will host a ribbon-cutting event and meet and greet appearance today with rapper and cannabis entrepreneur Berner, co-founder and CEO of Cookies, to celebrate the launch of Cookies Corners in New Jersey, the exclusive seller of cookies in that state. So more information down here if you wanted to pause to read to learn about TerraSend or Cookies or the partnership that they do have in New Jersey. So with that, though, some more news. Christopher Norman, thank you for sharing this, our trusted source out of New Jersey. As New Jersey continues to expand slowly but surely, and apparently their newest legal weed store could open up as of Friday, the Friday that just passed. So I'll put this article in the description if you wanted to read it, and I believe it's Ascend Wellness. That could be the 19th or 20th dispensary that does get to open in New Jersey. But again, better to see more dispensaries opening than not in this state, as obviously one state that could capitalize on the population, the demand, and the sooner they open more dispensaries, the sooner they will be able to do that. And lastly, Tom Engel highlighting that what we could anticipate, big news. Washington, D.C. regulators reported that medical cannabis patient registrations surged last month after the mayor signed a bill allowing people to self-certify for the program without having to get doctors' recommendations, which is fascinating, but to be expected, because when you can't reform your laws and launch an adult use program, what you then just do instead is allow everyone to become a medical patient so they can sign up and get access to the legal medical outlets that you have in D.C. And so after this announcement in June, I believe, it seems we see a massive jump of about 2,000 in that single month period. And so I imagine we're going to see that growth continue. And I'm not going to go through the whole story, but you can grab the link in the description if you wanted to read through that, because that is very interesting. And again, another way to just work around the rules when you can't play politics well and get the win that the people in your city are hoping for. So with that, though, New Cannabis Ventures reports in Canadian cannabis sales increased 1% sequentially to record $377.5 million in June. So good to see Canada continuing to just inch up as we move through time. Stats Canada released June retail sales for the country, and cannabis sales increased from May by 0.7% to $377.5 million, despite one less day. And May was revised from $375.8 million to $373.6 million, as sales were up 23% from a year ago, up from 19.5%, and May growth rate up from the 19.5% May growth rate, and above the lowest annual growth rate of 19.2% last year in December. But again, thank you, Ontario, for opening 120 stores a month and allowing for this growth to actually take place. As we see, we look through Ontario, the most populated province in Canada with about 14 million people, jumping up in May from 147.3 million to 152.2 million, which we love to see. So thank you, Ontario, for opening 120 stores a month and facilitating that growth, because, oh, Quebec, what you could be if you ditched that shitty public government model and properly supplied the demand, because they've only got about 50 stores for 80 people, obviously allowing the illicit market to thrive and eating into their growth, as Quebec saw sales in May of 50.5 million, only to drop in June to 49.8 million. So again, you don't open stores, you allow the black market to thrive. So open more legal outlets and you'll contribute to this growth. Well, as we move down to Alberta, I think has the fourth most population or third most, but obviously a lot more sales than Quebec, because they went with a private model, allowing their citizens to open stores and benefit as entrepreneurs. And what's fascinating is that they sold the same amount in June that they did in May, 67,164,000. So quite impressive, but good Alberta to contribute to that growth, as well as British Columbia, 54.9 million in May to 54 million in June. A little bit of a pullback from there, which is not ideal to see, but thank you, Ontario, for facilitating that growth. So basically everything I was saying here, if you wanted to read through it, you can pause to read, but good to see Canada sales continuing to head up despite the small market and the lack of people that they have. So on a bit of a global tour before we end off, just happy to share that the plan to legalize the use of recreational cannabis in Costa Rica is in the works. So still early, but just happy to share so far what we know. The government will present a bill to the Legislative Assembly to legalize the use of cannabis for recreational purposes. And this was announced by President Rodrigo Chavez as part of his report on the first 100 days of government. So we'll give him 3 months, and we'll try to check back in to see if Costa Rica is keeping their word and whether they do end up legalizing for recreational use, which which obviously would be very beneficial for them and the citizens in that country. While apparently from Benzinga.com, French senators call for urgent cannabis legalization, not just decriminalization, because obviously legalization is the right thing to do. Decriminalization just stops criminalizing, but it allows the black market to thrive and run rampant. That's why you want to legalize, create an adult use program or an adult use market that allows citizens in your state to be business owners, entrepreneurs, and capitalize on the growth, not the black markets. And yet another reason highlighting why legalization is a much smarter and more common sense approach than just decriminalizing. And so with that, seems France has found a way to champion this cause as legalization a solution to protect the youth. And I say good job, France. I commend you, because this is based on truth and fact and the latest data that we've seen in Canada and in legal US states. As according to the letter, this legal measure could be compared to existing public policies for tobacco and alcohol or even gambling, as it should be. And that's exactly what we get if we deschedule cannabis from the CSA, making it now a legal substance, no longer an illegal substance, and that would solve so many domestic issues. Regardless, also said that legalization will provide the means to act more effectively to better protect citizens and especially young people, which is true. It will make it harder for them to access. So more information here if you wanted to pause to read why they didn't want to go with the decriminalization route. And then just to highlight up here, a letter published in the Le Monde explores several options for cannabis legalization in France. But unfortunately, it seems through the launching of a consultation process, so it seems it's going to be a long, drawn-out process to figure this out and get this done. The European country seeks to culminate in proposing a new law to legalize rec cannabis. So this is great, but don't expect it anytime soon. But at least France is taking steps in the right direction, which I'm happy to report. We do like to see that. And so lastly, just wanted to share another prime example of how cannabis can save lives, especially those for children who just need a safer, non-addictive alternative to opioids that are not helping them. And so another example, cannabis saving lives, THC saving lives. Stop demonizing this incredible plant medicine. The stigma is based solely on lies told for profit and free slavery. And so thank you, Ruby DeVoy, for again pointing out the obvious and fighting for freeing this plant, especially for the medicine that it is for the people that need it. As this is a video of Alfie is swimming in the sea by himself, closely followed by his dad. It is said THC and its long-term use could damage the growing brain. Alfie is prescribed CBD and THC oil on the NHS. So this is another example out of the UK where it's very difficult to get cannabis as a medicine, and we're seeing more, especially even kids, getting their lives back because they're getting access to CBD or some form of cannabis medicine there, which again, this is just these little examples that break through. These are the stories that we need to help spread the awareness. But this is the most well-tolerated medication he's ever had. What do you think? Any damage here? There's a kid swimming again because he's got access to cannabis. How are we keeping this away from people that need it? It's horrible. But I just hope you can hear the joy in this mom's giggles and laughs when they come, because I'm not a parent. I don't know what it's like, but I can imagine if you've gone through everything and the one thing that will help your kid is cannabis, you'll do anything to get access to it for your kid. So
look how far and Dad's like right there.
Dad's keeping close watch, man. He's just like, I love to see this. We need more stories like this. Heartwarming. And that's why we keep fighting for this plant, folks. And that is it for today's episode. I thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update in the world of cannabis. Have a great weekend, everybody.